Roy, you can start.
Okay, I'm ready. Can I continue?
Yes, you can.
Can I continue?
Yes, you can, Roy.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the organizers of the event. It's a great pleasure of being here today, and I'm sure the delegates will enjoy this presentation. It's a very important presentation, and I thank you on behalf of the SAQCC Gas, who I'm representing today. So, in the short period of time that I have, it's important for delegates to understand compliance to gas and, of course, the safety side of it. So let's see two pillars. One will be the compliance, and the other one will be safety. And I think in the construction environment, it's inevitable anyway. There's such a lot of regulations, such a lot of legislation, such a lot of health and safety standards out there that it's so important for everybody to grasp that. So allow me the opportunity just to, on a high level, just to speak to you, especially in your environment or any environment that you are. I take it that there's different delegates with different exposures here, from design architects to construction to developers to competent people, a variety of people working in. But if you put your gas hat on when you construct these things or you design these things, it's so important to understand what the environment is. So let's just continue a bit. So obviously, just quickly, the vision and mission of the organization, you can read it with me, but of course it's central to safety. And the second part of it obviously is that we are mandated. So government's given this institution a mandate, and its mandate is to register competent people, other words, people that are trained for a specific scope of work. And of course, if they're proven competent, they become licensed to work in the gas environment on different levels. For example, on residential level, like houses, flats, or restaurants, or hospitals, malls. It doesn't matter where the gas is being used, but different or various types of gas practitioners are mandated by the government to this institution. So obviously, in an array of industry members that we have, so in all these fields, lots of it, of course, is heating or cooling. But if you quickly read it with me, you'll see it's got a residential flavor to it, it's got a commercial flavor to it, and it's got an industrial flavor to it. And that's very important to understand, that the gas and different gas types, which I'm going to come to, I'll expose you to that in terms of legislation. At the end of the day, this is what it means. There's regulations out there you can't ignore, and standards in support of the regulations are particularly vital in terms of different gas types. And obviously it's related to people, equipment, obviously training, and at the end of the day, the licensing aspect comes out of it. So people working in this environment need to be licensed. That's the bottom line of the mandate. And that's, as I did say, the mandate given by government to this institution to register persons to work in the gas space. People always ask me, but where does reticulation always fit in terms of the framework? And you can see it's even enshrined in the Constitution. I mean, there's always been reticulation, not only water or in sewage, but gas specific as well. And that's, I just brought the slide out for you to say, at the end of the day, it's enshrined in the Constitution and petering down right up to a very important documentation called the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And of course, this is the main act I'm going to speak to today. Never mind, it's one persistent regulation that it has. So that's very, very key to understand that. So you can't ignore the framework, and that's very important. If you're a designer, you're a constructor, you're a developer, it doesn't matter. If there's gas involved, you cannot ignore this type of legislation. I put this slide on for businesses. It's a conceptual compliance and safety relationship between things. But if you ever picture your business there, you can never ignore the outer circles. In everything you do on a more or larger scale, you cannot ignore the framework. And that framework is the compliance and safety framework. And you'll see, for instance, anything you design, you construct, you develop, you install, you manufacture, it's always got this framework. And it's always statutory and your own regulations. It's always got a quality and environmental aspect to it. And of course, in this segment of presentation, I'm going to speak mainly to the safety and health. So that's the mandate we have as an institution, and that's where we speak. But as a business, doesn't matter what you do, you cannot ignore this framework. And that's very important to understand that. And if you understand that, you understand the compliance and safety interrelationship. As I did allude to, there are strong legislation in place. The Act, of course, is the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And underneath that is a very specific regulation referred to as the Pressure Equipment Regulations, or the acronym PER. Very strong legislation, and it speaks directly to the workplace. And in the Pressure Equipment Regulation, it speaks directly to equipment under pressure. And that's where the institution also gets its powers or authority from, as you'll see going down. So as I did allude, there's a gas practitioner registration body, which is that mandated body by an institution, government, like the Department of Employment and Labour, who is the owner of the Occupational Safety and Health Act. It gives its mandate to an institution which I'm representing this morning, the SAQCC GAS. As its name said, it's the South African Qualification and Certifications Committee. And it takes its strength from the regulations called the Pressure Equipment Regulations. So you have these two legislative arms that you cannot ignore it. But also very important to come down more to the lower levels, or layman's terms, is there's 4 institutions or 4 associations actually that form this SAQCC GAS. Let me just quickly on them. The first one will be the LPG Association, in other words, the Liquefied Petroleum Gas Association of South Africa. And then you get another one is SAGA, that is the Southern African Gas Association. I'll come to what they do after this. And then you have another association. It's the South African Compressed Gases Association. Its name speaks to itself. And then you'll have another one, it's SAGA. That's the Refrigeration and Contractors Association. So if you had to take direction from these 4 associations, it implies these are the 4 associations that look after all the gas types in South Africa. So respectfully, these 4 associations form the SAQCC GAS to ensure that people are trained, they're competent, and at the end of the day, they are licensed to work on that specific gas in whatever application their license states. So that's very important in terms of the registration body. Let's quickly just look at who are these associations in brief. Now, the comment here on top is all gases are regulated post 2009. And why 2009? 2009 is when this regulation was promulgated or gazetted for the first time. It actually repealed previous regulation, which for discussion purposes was called the VUP, which is the Vessels Under Pressure Regulation. So it repealed it in 2009. So that's why all gases. And why all gases? Pre-2009, only the fuel gases were regulated. That's your liquefied petroleum gas and your natural gas in the country. The other 2 associations, like these 2 here, weren't regulated via that regulation. So all gases are now regulated post 2000, and that's very important to take direction from this. And here it is. The one association is the Southern African Gas Association, which I did speak to. It addresses or regulates the natural gas in the country. And you'll see the different applications. Pipeline gas, compressed gas, in other words, what it says, in cylinder-based or bulk tanks. And then the virtual piping network. So natural gas is the one that this association administers. Then you have the other one, the South African Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Contractors Association. As it speaks, all the air conditioning and refrigerant gases. As I did say, the Compressed Gases Association, it's the industrial gases and, of course, the medical. And then, last but not least, Liquefied Petroleum Gas Association of South Africa. Commonly, you will know it as your cylinder for cooking, heating, commonly throughout the country. So it's cylinder-based, and of course, it's also bulk tank-based. And they also have auto gas here. I probably should have added that. Natural gas and auto gas vehicles, but driven by LPG. So these are the four associations, as I did allude here. And I say once again, all gases in South Africa are regulated. So when you work in this environment, you can't ignore the legislation. You can't ignore the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and especially you cannot ignore the pressure equipment regulations. This takes some direction from the regulation, quote unquote. So here's a regulation for you to look up, the pressure equipment regulation. You can download by all means. It's of course in public space, so it's free. But look specifically at regulation 17 of this regulation. And I just quoted two for the sake of simplicity. It says, no person shall install or remove an appliance, pressure equipment, or system for gas in any other manner than in accordance with the safety standard. The second one says is no person shall install or remove a gas appliance or a gas system or a gas articulation system unless this person is an authorized person. So this regulation speaks to an authorized person, which is also known as a gas practitioner. The generic term authorized person just means you need to be licensed to work in this environment. And this SAQCC gas takes its direction from regulation 17. So that's very important. And simplistically, in layman's terms, it means you can't work on gas, whatever the application is, if you're not competent and you're not proven to have license to work on that or authorized to work on that. And that's very key to understand that and to take direction from that. So, and last but not least is this gas practitioner will issue a certificate of conformity after completion of a gas installation, modification, alteration, or change of user or ownership. So a lot of activities here. That means you need a COC, is a short for certificate of conformity once again. If you complete the gas installation, for example, if you work on the residential house and you are putting in a gas oven or a geyser or space heaters or whatever, you have to have a certificate of conformity once that installation is completed and it's proven fit for purpose and it's safe. Even in a restaurant, same thing. Even in hospitals, even in malls, air conditioning, LPG gas, compressed gases, it doesn't matter where the gas is. It's the same thing that happens there and the same requirement. So just take note. A new installation, if you modify it, if you alter it, or there's a change of use or ownership. Now, this is specifically in the public domain, meaning if you sell your house or your restaurant or a hospital, for example, there's change of users or ownership. And the people that the transferring attorney or conveyances require a COC for transfer of property. So please take note of that. Just to tell you what this definition of this authorized person is, you can quickly read it, not a legal jargon, but it means a person who is registered as competent. There is a scope of work for which he's proven to be competent, and it's proved by the association I'm representing today. And of course, the Chief Inspector under the Department of Employment and Labour grants that mandate. In our country, we have 4 SAQCCs, of which we are only one. But I bring the second one also out for you, is that fire is also regulated in our country, especially when you're designing a mall or a house or a flats or multi-dwellings or whatever you're designing, or the architects and the construction and developer take heed of these, especially in public space, that these are also regulated by the same regulation. Just as a nutshell, this gas practitioner or authorized person can work in one or more of these environments. So in other words, his license incorporates one or more of these. And that's important to understand. All I want you to take from that moment is that this person is licensed, and depending on his competency, he can operate in those fields. There's another very important scope. Now remember, I just concluded let's call it the human side, the person side. When you want to work on gas, you need to be registered. This is the second arm of the regulation. It's called Regulation 5, if you want to go look it up under this regulation. It says duties of importers. It goes about equipment. There are two associations in this country, the Southern African Gas Association and the Liquefied Petroleum Gas Association of South Africa, that register or permit equipment in this country. But this is what the regulation states. Importers and suppliers shall ensure that the pressure equipment sold complies with this regulation. Keyword, sold. The second one is any pressure equipment that requires a permit to be issued, like I just added there, shall ensure that such approval is obtained by the importer or the manufacturer before the equipment is placed. So here's two key fundamental words in terms of equipment. In these two environments, this is the natural gas and the liquefied petroleum gas, even if it's residential, commercial, or industrial, you require permits. And these two institutions grant that permit under this regulation. Please take note of that. You cannot sell or place equipment for these two gas types if it's not permitted. And this is just a summary. So there's a mandate given by the Department of Employment and Labor to these two institutions to do that. And that's the environment. Please take note of that. What the SAQCC gas also does very often is to make third parties aware. And I think this session today is one of them. But just for example, following the slide, you'll see we train the labor inspectors, and that's very important for people on this delegation or in this conference, is to understand we actually make or educate labor inspectors under the Department of Employment and Labor to inspect gas sites, maybe for an incident or maybe just non-conformances or an accident, but we educate them from a gas perspective. That's very important. So when they come into your premises, they're going to ask you a couple of questions. Then, of course, obviously the non-registered side of, there's a few of non-registered people in these four gas types that I just showed you. It is wrong. We remedial these people to say, how can we help you? Show them in the right direction. And if they don't want to listen, there is consequences. But just for example, some third parties we have road shows with, or breakfasts, or whatever you want to call it, but awareness sessions is these people here. And I probably think one of the most important is the one in red, the insurance houses. Why insurance houses? Insurance houses look for gaps. So if you're non-compliant in the gas business, you're doing things outside of the framework, just be aware of that. The insurance houses are educated. They take note of these requirements from the regulations and legislation, and they will find gaps if they have to. And they'll pay you 50% of your claim, for example. But just be aware that it's so important to be on a conference like today, but also how we educate the third parties. It's very, very important. All right. What's also very important is tenders. I think there's an improved awareness of tenders, but just look at what I got on the slide for you is I'm requesting people that make use of tenders for work to be done, try and adhere to these three, or you should adhere to these three. For example, ensure the persons applying for the tender or persons contracted or registered. It is so key that when you put a tender out that you request this information. In other words, the opposite is also true. Don't award tenders to non-approved persons. But remember now, a tenderer can probably contract that work out, which is also what happens. But if you contract the work out, you need to make sure that the persons you're contracting are registered. Because at the end of the day, the person's got to certify the work done. So, first of all, provide a copy of valid license. I think, personally, part of the tender processes is to, from an ethical perspective, from a transparent perspective, is to say, give me your valid licenses as part of the tender documentation. That makes everybody comfortable. That's the first one. The second one, ensure appliances and equipment to be supplied is registered. And I think I've mentioned that. If you employ anybody, an importer or a manufacturer, as part of your tender process, remember the sold and the placed in the market. Very important. So you've got to have reputable manufacturers and reputable importers, and then all's above board. So in other words, you can request permits. I am licensed by an institution like those two associations I just set out here. Here's the permits for the equipment I'm going to provide as part of this tender. I think it's sound best practice. And then I think the last one is probably the most important, is that this person here that you appointed as part of your tender, you got the work, he's got to sign it off. So this registered gas practitioner, within his scope of work and within the type of gas he's allowed to work on, can issue a certificate of conformity for work completed. So if you take these three into consideration, a sound tender and the gas industry is happy. That means you're legit, above board, and that's what's important here. And at the end of the day, it's safe for the user. The user on whatever level, it doesn't matter. But the user, you're giving him a fit for purpose, a compliant and a safe installation. And in closing is, I think the slide says it all. It's just, you've got to have the right people, the right equipment, follow the regulations, apply the standards, sign the work off, use a registered gas practitioner, and all is hunky-dory. I put this comment on the side here, and I think the audience needs to take note. The Occupational Health and Safety Amendment Bill has just gone through a public phase, other public comment phase, as they would call it, and it's closed. Why I bring it out is they've increased the penalties for non-compliance excessively. So I think companies need to take heed of that. The fines are exhaustive. They are heavy penalties. In other words, non-compliance at the end of the day has severe consequences. I thank you. Are there any questions?
Hi, Roy. Okay, so we do have some questions for you. All right. So Teresa asked, how do we verify the validity of a COC?
Okay, Okay, each association, those 4 associations that I mentioned for you, can verify for you. So you can contact them. It's an additional verification, but the biggest thing is to look at the person's license. The license has a validity period of 3 years. So if you ask the gas practitioner for his license, you'll see on the bottom, you see it's got an expiry date, and you can always check that. But I would say, if there's any doubts, phone one of those associations and they'll confirm it for you. Thank you.
Okay. And then follow on from that question, she's asked, do you find compliance with the regulation easy? What are the recent changes on the regulations?
Sure. Look, I don't know if the person's aware of the regulations. There are changes happening at the moment in public space. The same document I did say to you, the pressure equipment regulation, is at the moment in public space for 3 months. It's available. The public can comment on it. So there's a lot of changes. I cannot be able to address all those at the moment. Sorry about that. But please engage with the government in terms of reviewing or making comments on the current regulations that in public space. Thank you. Also reading the questions with you.
Sorry, Roy, I'm having a little bit of sound issues on my side.
Okay.
All right, so there's another question from Skulk Pina. What has a fire department as part of a local authority to do with regulating compliance, as it's not part of regulation in the NBR SANS 10400?
Yes, yeah. I'm not so. I don't work much. Well, it's a good question. Thank you for the question. The fire department always works where gas is stored. In other words, in cylinders. So they play a huge part in ensuring the safe storage of it over and above what SANS 10400 says. Because the gas, if you're looking at liquefied petroleum gas, it's got its own standards, but it involves the fire brigade to certify that storage is in compliance to housing regulations. Thank you.
Okay, and then our last one.
Cool. Is that me or you?
It's me. I'm having sound issues. All the different monitors are going off as we try to do anything. Charles here. Charles has asked, does one need to get council submission for gas installation, or is it only the storage structure that needs to be submitted?
Yeah. It's also a very good question. I think I did partially answer that one. On the residential side and commercial, actually, where there's storage of liquefied petroleum gas, for example, and other gases, you work hand in hand with the fire brigade in terms of storage. And the other part of that question is installation is then governed by this person called a gas practitioner, because he's qualified, he's competent, and is licensed to ensure the gas installation is 100%. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roy. And then we have another question here from Chinadam, and he asks, please explain the difference between natural gas and liquefied petroleum gas.
Yeah. Just, the two go hand in hand. They both hydrocarbons, for what it's worth. The characteristics of the two is natural gas is lighter than air, and the liquefied petroleum gas is heavier than air. So their properties differ. Also, liquefied petroleum gas, generally speaking, comes in the form of under pressure in a liquid form, and of course through a vaporizer becomes a gas. Where natural gas is pipeline based. In other words, we look onto a source that is pipeline. There's no cylinders, nothing. Purely hooking onto a distribution system and feeding this lower pressurized systems to where the gas is consumed. In a nutshell, high level, that's what the difference is.
Okay. And then his second question is, what remedies are available if the competent person certifies the work after completion and defects are still found later?
Yeah, you have consequences. Very good question as well. It happens very seldom, but you as an owner or a user to whom the system was certified, you have the fullest right to engage with the practitioner. Why? If it's not remedied well, speak to the association or speak to this association called the SAQCC Gas and lay that complaint, because it goes about compliance and it goes about safety at the end of the day.
Okay. And then the follow-up to Charlotte's question is the certificate valid for 3 or for 5 years?
Thank you for the question. It's 3 years. How it works is your initial registration is 3 years, and then we have cycles of 3 years thereafter. Where in between we have refresher courses to take you to the next level, or if there's any legislation changes or health and safety changes, it will be a course. So it's refresher, but it's 3 year cycles.
Okay.
If that answers the question.
Cycles.
Thank you.
Okay. Fantastic. And I'm going to be handing over through to.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roy.
Thank you for the opportunity.
To the end of the questions. Yes, we appreciate it. I'm going to hand over through to Tracy, who is actually going to do a formal closing of this.
Welcome.
Again, much appreciated.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Roy. I do apologize about my sound issues.
No problem.
We're all learning on this digital platform. Thank you very much to SAQCC, and thank you to everybody who has joined us today. I'm sure we've already had requests for the presentation. So the presentation is recorded. So we will pop it up onto the stream straight after this. You'll be able to view it. Again, the CPD accreditation. If you need CPD points and you haven't registered already, please follow the link in the chat. And with that, I say a big thank you to you, Roy. Thank you for your time. And to all the attendees, we hope to see you in the next session, which will be happening at 12 o'clock. Great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Roy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.